One day you'll wake up, and there won't be any more time to do the things you always wanted. You'll look back and realize you didn't live. You just survived. This story is for the dreamers who stop dreaming. This is for the people who feel stuck. Don't waste your life. Listen till the end, because this story might just be your story. Arman was 29 years old. He lived in a small apartment in the city. Every morning, he woke up at 7 a.m., made the same cup of tea, wore the same shirt, and went to the same office. His life looked normal from the outside. But deep inside, Arman felt something was missing. He had dreams once. Big dreams. As a child, Arman wanted to travel the world. He loved to paint and always imagined his art in a gallery. But somewhere between school, college, and a job, those dreams got lost. He worked as an accountant in a company. He didn't hate his job, but he didn't love it either. His boss was strict, and his co-workers only talked about work. There was no excitement, no creativity, no real connection. Every day felt the same. On Sundays, Arman stayed in bed longer. He watched movies, scrolled through his phone, and told himself, "Next week I'll change something." But he never did. One night, Arman sat on his balcony, watching the city lights. He looked up at the stars and thought, "Is this all there is to life?" He remembered his childhood dreams. He remembered the feeling of painting with joy. He remembered how alive he used to feel. Tears rolled down his cheeks. Just then his phone buzzed. It was a message from his old school friend, Fahad. It read, "Hey bro, I'm visiting next month. Let's meet up. So much to tell you. Life's been crazy." Arman smiled. Fahad had always been the adventurous one. While Arman chose the safe path, Fahad had taken risks. He had started his own travel vlog and was living his dream. Arman clicked on Fahad's Instagram. There he was, paragliding in Turkey, hiking in Nepal, smiling in front of the Eiffel Tower. Thousands of likes. People writing, "You're living the dream." Arman closed the app. He looked around his room. Gray walls, unpaid bills, dusty shelves, and a half-finished painting on the corner table. It had been sitting there for years. He whispered to himself, "What am I doing with my life?" 10 years ago, Arman's art teacher, Mrs. Ruxana, had said something to him after class. She had looked him in the eyes and said, "Arman, you have a gift. Don't let life make you forget it. If you don't chase your dream, one day you'll live with regret." Back then Arman smiled and said, "One day I will, madam." But that one day never came. The next week at work something happened. Arman's colleague, Samir, suddenly collapsed at his desk. Everyone rushed to help. An ambulance came. Turned out Samir had a heart attack. He was only 34. The whole office was in shock. Later, Arman sat alone in the break room, shaking. That could have been me, he thought. Working day and night, no passion, no rest, for what? That night, Arman made a decision. He took out his old sketch pad. He drew for hours. For the first time in years, he felt alive. He wrote on a sticky note and stuck it on his mirror. "Don't waste your life." The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual. He didn't scroll through his phone. He didn't complain about work. Instead, he painted for 30 minutes before getting ready. At work, he smiled more. He noticed the little things. The way the sun hit his desk. The sound of birds outside the window. Life had small beauties, and he had ignored them for too long. He also made a list of dreams. Visit one new country this year. Post his art online. Wake up with purpose. Reconnect with old passions. Live with no regrets. It wasn't a big plan, but it was a start. 2 weeks later, Fahad arrived in town. The two friends met at a small cafe. Fahad looked different. Tan skin, glowing smile, full of energy. They talked for hours. Fahad shared stories of the Himalayas, meeting monks in Thailand, and painting with locals in Italy. Arman listened in silence. But inside something was burning. Desire, hope, hunger for more. Then Fahad asked, "What about you, Arman? What have you been up to?" Arman hesitated. "Just work. Nothing special. Fahad leaned in and said, "You know, you don't have to live like that. You're not stuck. You just think you are." That night, Arman couldn't sleep. The world hadn't changed. His job was still there. His bills were still unpaid. But he was starting to change. And sometimes that's all it takes. Just a small spark to start a big fire. Course. Here's part 2 of your story. Don't waste your life in simple, emotional English and paragraph format. Perfect for your YouTube story narration, around 1,000 words. The night after meeting Fahad, Arman couldn't sleep. His friend's words echoed in his mind. "You're not stuck. You just think you are." He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, asking himself deep questions. What if I really tried? What if I gave my dream a real chance? The next morning he didn't hit snooze. He didn't pick up his phone. Instead, he sat at the edge of his bed and looked around his room. It was still the same, small, quiet, plain. But inside him something was different. He stood up and walked to the mirror. On it, the sticky note still read, "Don't waste your life." He looked into his own eyes, and for the first time in years, he smiled at himself. That weekend, Arman went to a local art market. He hadn't stepped into that world in a long time. There were people everywhere, young, old, students, travelers, all admiring the colorful paintings, handmade crafts, and passionate artists. Arman walked around slowly, taking in the energy. Something inside him stirred. This was where he belonged. He bought a small canvas, a few brushes, and some paints. They were not expensive, but to Arman they were priceless. When he returned home, he cleared a corner of his room and turned it into his art space. It was just a desk, a chair, and his materials, but to him it felt like a new world. That night he painted for hours. No rules, no pressure, just colors, emotion, and freedom. He didn't realize how much time had passed until he looked at the clock. It was 3 a.m. But he wasn't tired. He felt alive. The next few days he followed the same rhythm. Wake up early. Paint a little before work. Go to the office. Come home. Paint again. It was still hard. His job hadn't changed. The traffic was still annoying. The office was still dull. But his spirit had started to glow again. He was no longer just existing. He was beginning to live. After 2 weeks, Arman decided to take a step further. He created an Instagram page and called it Art by Arman. His hands trembled as he posted his first painting, a night sky he had painted from his balcony. In the caption he wrote, "Trying again. It's never too late. #new beginning." He didn't expect much. But within an hour, his phone buzzed with likes, comments, and messages. Old school friends wrote, "Wow, you still got it. And this is amazing." Arman stared at his phone, stunned. For so long, he had hidden this part of himself. Now it was being seen again, appreciated again. That night, he didn't cry out of sadness, but out of hope. Even though things were starting to change, Arman still felt unsure about his future. His job took up most of his time. His dream was growing but slowly. And then, one day at work, he sat alone in the office cafeteria and asked himself a serious question. Can I do this for the rest of my life? The answer scared him. Well, he didn't want to live like this forever. But quitting his job wasn't easy. There were bills, responsibilities. What if he failed? What if people laughed? What if his art wasn't good enough? He called Fahad again. They met for tea. Arman told him everything. His doubts, his fears, his guilt. Fahad listened quietly, then smiled and said, "Fear is normal, Arman. But regret, that stays forever. You don't have to quit right now. Just give your dream a real chance. 1 hour a day. 2 hours a day. That's how it begins." Arman nodded slowly. Fahad was right. He didn't have to jump. He could walk. But he had to walk forward. From that day on, Arman made his dream a second job. He painted every day, learned how to take better photos of his work, and studied how other artists shared their stories online. He watched videos, read books, and even joined a small online art group. His page started to grow. Slowly at first. 100 followers. Then 200. Then 500. People messaged him to say his work inspired them. A student asked if he could buy a print. A young girl wrote that she started painting again because of him. Arman couldn't believe it. His work was making a difference. His dream was no longer just his. It was reaching others. A few months later, Arman looked at his list of dreams. One of them said, "Visit one new country this year." He had saved a little money from cutting down on unnecessary expenses. It wasn't much, but it was enough. He opened his laptop and searched for cheap flights. After hours of searching, he clicked book on a ticket to Turkey. It was a place he had always wanted to see. Beautiful architecture, rich culture, and art everywhere. He didn't tell anyone except Fahad. This was his moment. His first real step into the world. As the plane took off, Arman looked out the window. The sky was endless. He closed his eyes and smiled. I almost gave up, he thought. I almost believed this life wasn't for me. But here he was, flying toward his dream. In Istanbul, he walked for hours, visited art galleries, sat by the sea, and painted in his sketchbook every night. One evening, during sunset, he was painting the Hagia Sophia when a tourist stopped and looked at his work. She smiled and asked, "Can I buy this?" Arman looked up in shock. "You want to buy my painting?" The woman nodded. "It has heart. That's what makes it special." Arman sold his first piece of art on a street in a foreign country. That night, back in his hotel room, he held the money in his hand and tears filled his eyes. He wasn't rich. He wasn't famous. But he was living his dream. For the first time in years, he didn't feel lost. He felt like he had found himself again. Before he left Turkey, Arman sat by the Bosphorus River and wrote a letter to himself. A letter to remind him of this moment, this feeling, and this truth. Life is too short to live someone else's dream. You get only one chance. Don't waste it. Arman returned home from Turkey with a new fire in his heart. The streets of Istanbul, the warmth of strangers, the sound of the sea, and the moment he sold his first painting, it all stayed with him. He wasn't the same person who had left. He had seen what life could be if he stopped holding back. Now he wanted more than just weekends and late-night painting sessions. He wanted to give his full time, his full heart, to the life he truly wanted. But back in the office, reality hit him again. The same gray walls. The same tired faces. The same noise of printers, emails, and coffee machines. Everything looked smaller now. Arman felt trapped again. Not because the office had changed, but because he had changed. His soul no longer fit inside that small routine. Sitting at his desk, he looked at the screen, his hands frozen on the keyboard. And then a thought came to him, clear, honest, and loud. I don't belong here anymore. He didn't quit that day. He waited. He planned. He started saving more money, cutting unnecessary expenses, and building a small collection of his best artwork. He also began preparing a simple website to sell his paintings. He knew it wouldn't be easy. There were no guarantees. But for the first time he didn't feel afraid. He felt ready. 1 month later, Arman walked into his boss's office and said the words he had feared for years. I'm leaving. His boss was surprised. Are you sure? You've been with us for a long time. People don't leave stable jobs like this easily. Arman smiled and replied, That's exactly why I'm leaving. I don't want to live a life just because it's safe. I want to live a life that's mine. With that, he handed in his resignation letter and walked out of the office, not with fear, but with peace. That evening, he stood on his balcony, looking at the city lights, the same way he did many months ago when he felt lost and broken. But this time something was different. There was no emptiness in his chest. There was no sadness in his heart. There was only freedom. The wind touched his face gently like a friend saying, Welcome back. In the following weeks, Arman worked harder than ever before. He wasn't working for a boss or a company anymore. He was working for himself, for his dream, For the boy who once wanted to paint the world. He woke up early, painted all morning, posted online, reached out to local art cafes, joined weekend markets, and slowly started getting noticed. People started sharing his work. A local newspaper wrote a short piece about his journey. His Instagram grew. Small art businesses asked to collaborate. Money didn't pour in quickly. Some days were hard. There were times he doubted himself. Times when paintings didn't sell. Times when he felt lonely. But he didn't give up. Because every night when he went to bed, he felt proud. He knew he was finally living the life he had once only dreamed about. One morning he received a message from a school. They were organizing an art week and wanted Arman to be a guest speaker. First he felt nervous. Me. What will I say? But then he remembered something his teacher had once told him. You have a gift. Don't let life make you forget it. So he said yes. Standing in front of a classroom full of students, Arman shared his story. He spoke from the heart. He talked about dreams, fear, failure, and how he almost gave up. The students listened silently. Some nodded. Some even had tears in their eyes. After his talk, a young girl walked up to him and said, "Sir, I want to be an artist too. But my parents say it's not safe." Arman knelt down, looked her in the eyes and said, "Sometimes the safest path is the one that kills your spirit slowly. You don't have to throw everything away today. Just don't forget who you are. And never stop believing that your dream matters." That night, Arman sat in his room, surrounded by his paintings. He looked around and smiled. It had taken time. It had taken pain. But he had made it. Not because he was lucky, but because he finally chose to live on purpose. Years later, Arman's art studio was full. His name became known in local art circles. He taught workshops, sold his art worldwide, and even started mentoring young artists. But no matter how far he went, he never forgot the sticky note that started it all. He kept it framed on his wall. It simply said, "Don't waste your life." This story isn't just about Arman. It's about all of us. We all have dreams. We all have fears. But the truth is, life is short. Time passes quickly. And the biggest tragedy isn't failure. It's regret. Don't let your life become a list of what-ifs. Don't wait for the perfect moment. It may never come. The right time is now. So if you're watching this, take a moment. Think about your own dream. The one you buried. The one you told yourself was impossible. And ask yourself this. What would happen if I stopped waiting and started trying? You don't need to be great to begin. But you need to begin to become great. Your life is your story. Don't let someone else write the ending.